Welcome to the Breakthrough Moments podcast, a podcast where challenges meet opportunities. I'm Harold, and together with my co-host 𝗧𝗸, we explore stories of innovators, leaders, professionals, and entrepreneurs and how they turn obstacles into game-changing breakthroughs. Get ready for insights that inspire and lessons that last. Subscribe now and let's dive into the moments that define success. Welcome to today's episode of the Breakthrough Moments podcast. Today's guest is Daniel Ghinn, a visionary founder and CEO of Creation, a boutique consultancy that has been transforming the healthcare industry for over 26 years. With a background in geophysical exploration and a deep passion for technology, Daniel has pioneered innovative approaches to data-driven insights, including the groundbreaking concept of digital opinion leaders in the healthcare space. Together with his wife, Daniel has built a company that not only competes with the industry giants, but also continues to push the boundaries of what's possible in healthcare and beyond. Join us today to delve into Daniel's journey, the challenges he has overcome, and his vision for the future. So Daniel, nice to see you again. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Harold. Thanks for having me.
So for people that don't know you, can you briefly describe what you guys do at Creation?
Great. Yeah, so I lead the team at Creation. In brief, we describe it as an insights consultancy for healthcare, for the healthcare industry. So we develop insights from, particularly in the digital space, we develop insights from the online voices of healthcare professionals to understand and learn what health professionals are thinking and saying and how that's changing and what's driving that. And we share those insights with key stakeholders in healthcare, whether that's healthcare industry, NGOs, other organizations that and healthcare professionals themselves that will be able to hopefully provide better health and better health outcomes by learning from that massive collective intelligence that exists out there in the voice of online healthcare professionals.
Yeah, that's very nice. And we had a quick chat before we started and jumped on this podcast, and you gave a bit of a background in terms of how you started out in a completely different space, not healthcare at all. Could you kind of describe a bit about the story that made you transition from the geophysical exploration and founding a healthcare insights consultancy?
Yeah.
And kind of what was the pivotal moment back there?
Yeah, it's right. I did start out my career in geophysical exploration, but I think there's such a significant parallel with the work that I'm doing now, and I'm doing with the team at creation.co now, because really we were finding signals in data. The company I worked for was doing, it was basically creating echo soundings on the Earth's surface to discover what the layers beneath the Earth look like. And we were doing a massive amount of processing of data to develop sort of 3D sections of the Earth's crust and this kind of thing. I loved that. For me, the kind of exposure to work and working with data and particularly working with technologies back in the mid-1990s, early to mid-1990s, and I'd always had a fascination with computers and the power of computers and the ability to create new things, achieve new outcomes with computing technology. And what I was doing while I was working for this geophysical exploration company was I was getting access to some really powerful computers. And I would spend my lunch times, I would jump on these computers and do new creative things for fun with them, create little animations or design something or whatever. And then one day I thought, I bet someone would pay me for my main career to do the fun things I'm doing at lunchtime, just getting on and writing custom programs and this kind of thing. And so I took a job actually working for a pharmaceutical market research company. And that was my exposure really to the pharmaceutical industry. And I was just blown away by what was happening in the industry, what they were doing, how they were using insights and data. And that just got me super excited. And that's really how that kind of transition started. I went on for a few other years working in software programming. And then what happened really, I think one of the breakthrough moments for me was seeing that the World Wide Web, which had launched in the mid-90s, we were now getting on towards the late 90s. And I thought, this is changing everything. Like everything changes because now the software I was writing, you could deploy on the web and make it available to anyone, anywhere in the world. And you could learn from their experiences. So the future is going to be completely different because of this. And that's what inspired me really to launch what is now Creation.co. And of course, I'd already been working in the healthcare sector. And rapidly it turned out that I was working with doctors, helping them to get online. I was working with pharmaceutical companies, And so healthcare became a sector that, we didn't try to focus on healthcare, but it just became something that grew organically and became a specialty area for us.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think I remember one of the things that we talked about was kind of like the transition in terms of how technology and things changed, and how it basically made you adapt, and kind of like the change around 2000, early 2000. And you mentioned kind of like just now as well the impact of technology. Kind of like, and one of the things that we discussed in the previous conversation was about large language models and how other type of technologies are changing the fields in terms of, especially now with what Creation does in terms of delivering those insights. Like, how do you see that these new technologies are going to change things looking forward into the future?
I think we're in such an exciting time now with large language models and the computing power that has enabled those large language models to really deliver powerful insights from a massive amount of data. I feel like I think there was a point last year where I was like, we're back where we were in the late 90s when I was so excited because the World Wide Web had launched, and I felt this changes everything about the way we interact with each other. And now I think when we were seeing the growth in large language model AI models last year, I thought this again changes everything. The way that we can ask questions of data completely changes. And, we've been using artificial intelligence in Creation.𝗂𝗺 for many years, and building our data using AI and so on. And that's been a really important part of our tools. But now with large language models, with LLMs, there's so much we can learn from our data. I think we're just at the beginning. I think that, as I say, it's like the 1990s all over again in a new kind of way, that the potential is huge. I think there's so much that is not yet been discovered about where this will take us. And I think that, I feel like we'll look back and be like, oh, there was the world before we had access to LLMs in this kind of way, and there's the world afterwards. And I think we're all still discovering, so much more. How can we use that really effectively? Already we've got a massive wealth of data, and we're still discovering how to really tap into that effectively using LLM technology.
So kind of like a follow-up to that, like, do you have any clear image in your mind in terms of like, how do you see it's actually going to, like, what is going to impact, how it's actually going to look like if you, let's say, skip down 10 years ahead of time from now? Like, if I would ask Daniel in 2034, like, how has AI and LLMs impacted creation and how you approach data?
It's amazing to think about where it will go. I think that we'll all be using data a lot more, but I think what's going to happen is we won't even think of it necessarily as using data. And maybe we will in, those of us that are at the maybe forefront of, specifically developing intelligence and insights from data. But I think that data will become even much more part of all of our lives in a significant way, without us even knowing it's happening. The way we interact with, the key thing with LLMs is, the way that we can interact with data and with computers changes. Things like using voice, having conversations with computers that just have access to an incredible amount of knowledge, means that a lot of the things that we had to do very manually before don't need to happen anymore. And so the manual effort can go into other things. And I think that's, again, why I relate it back to in the World Wide Web, and how do we communications at a large scale before the World Wide Web. I don't know, there was like CCTV models or kind of network-based television models for communication, or things that were really hard work at the time, but they were done because that was the way to do it. And I think that'll be the same with data. There are things that we do now, or have been doing until now, and probably will do for some time, that require a lot of very manual coding and programming of data analysis tools. That will happen, that would much more, they would just flow naturally. And so we'll be putting our manual effort into new things. I could never have predicted, back in the 90s, I felt like this changes everything, the World Wide Web, about how we interact. But, who knew back in the day, we were still connecting to the internet with modems that made all these squeaky sounds, and the speed of an internet connection was incredibly slow, and the cost of an internet connection was high. We put a permanent internet connection, it was called a killer stream internet connection, into the first office that we had, and it was like super expensive and also relatively super slow, but we thought it was fast at the time. We could never have imagined what the kind of internet access speeds we have now are back then, and what we'd be able to do, and streaming video and all those kind of things. At the time, we had little tiny, very, very slow GIFs that we could kind of share. And so I think we're at that kind of stage with LLMs at the moment. We're just in the very early stage of exploring it. What does the future look like? I can't even dream of what it's going to be in 2034. I'm excited about it though. I think I'm excited to be part of that.
Yeah, I'm also very excited about the LLMs. Like as we discussed in previous to this call as well, like we've been delving into that at our end as well, and it's fascinating just to see how much a change has made. Like since ChatGPT was launched in November 2022, it's incredible.
Amazing.
But it's been quite a while. It's 26 years since you founded 𝗧𝗂𝗺. And you actually did that with your wife as well. And one of the things that you pointed out which has become kind of like a recurring theme for creation is how you adapted to change in the industry, in the market, and all of these things. Because there's been significant shifts in the healthcare industry, and you adopted to these. And like, how would you say that the process has been to stay ahead of these changes, adopt to the changes, and keep the position in the market that you've so elegantly been able to do with creation?
I think that at the heart of it is got to be listening and keeping our eyes open to, what we're seeing, also listening to what we're hearing, not just online, but in real conversations with clients, trying to understand, as a tiny company, as a boutique consultancy, to be able to offer clients something that they're not currently getting elsewhere, and to look ahead and think what might they need and what might the opportunities be also to use tech and use insights to provide those is really, really key. So I think listening to clients, you mentioned that I co-founded the company with my wife. So listening to my wife and co-founder has been a really key part of that as well. We're both quite different personalities. We bring different strengths to what we're doing. And I think that's, a really important part of it. I'm always, I think my gifting is definitely to be a sort of visionary pioneer, to look to the future, to ask that, imagine what's possible. Imagine what could work if we did this. And I think my wife's role and business partner, her role is much more like imagine what could go wrong. Imagine, so that brings a balance to it all. In the early years, I was like, we could do this and that. And she'd be like, well, how are we going to pay the mortgage if you do that? And, those practical questions, which we got to resolve. Otherwise we wouldn't still be here 26 years later. So I think that's been really important. But I think also one of the things I love about being a small agile team is that we can try things out fast. We can jump in and explore ideas. We had a team member came and joined us some years ago, and they'd worked in one of the major, huge global consultancies, and he was blown away. He said, what happens in creation is that we have an idea, and the next day we're running with it and trying it out, and we can let it go just as quickly if we need to. But in the consultancy he'd come from, he said that just doesn't happen. Ideas take a long, long time to get through the system and decide we could do something with them. So I think that agility has been, a good part of our being able to adapt.
So it's been a combination of listening to the market, listening to the different players, the different parties involved, also including the employees inside of creation, but combining that with an agility to, what ideas can we have? What ideation can we have? What innovation can we create?
And the ideation is really important, because I'm not talking about asking clients, what do you want that you don't have now, and asking them to design the solution. Although sometimes that happens, but it's more about reading between the lines and thinking like, what do we see in the data? What do we see in the behaviors around us? What are we hearing from clients of their unmet needs or the things they're not satisfied with? And where are the opportunities to innovate in that? And I think that, the concept of digital opinion leaders, for example, one of the things that we came up with, this idea that we were seeing healthcare professionals really start to, become thought leaders online among their peers, which was something that had been established in the industry for many years in the offline space. The pharmaceutical industry calls them key opinion leaders. They're people who they've been involved in clinical trials. They may be lecturers at universities. They might speak at conferences, and they really, they write papers, and they help to kind of shape health practice going forward. And we were seeing doctors and other healthcare professionals using social media and seeing that it was possible to measure the real impact on their peers they were having. And we developed some methodologies around that. And we came up with this concept. So we think we're seeing the emergence of a digital opinion leader. And that was something which was, again, another breakthrough moment, really. It was just seeing that, when we tested that idea out in a medical affairs conference with some pharmaceutical leaders there, it really resonated with them. And they were like, we've never heard this before. This is a new idea. And we saw that, well, then now we need to develop some technology to be able to really profile and identify who these people are and find ways and methodologies for connecting with them and driving better health outcomes together.
And where do you think kind of like the digital key opinion leaders, or the digital opinion leaders, where's that going to take us in your space, in the healthcare, maybe in other sectors as well?
I think that, the concept of opinion leaders, and it probably works across multiple different industries, but I think in healthcare, this idea of key opinion leaders, and then more recently digital opinion leaders. But I think I first presented on digital opinion leaders back in 2013. So yeah, 11 years ago. And we've been developing methodologies around that since then. I mean, I think, I hope that, there'll come a day where we don't talk about digital anymore anyway, because, it's amazing. I think in the healthcare industry, there's still a lot of talk about going digital or moving things to a digital or an omni-channel kind of experience. But, I've been saying for a long time that we don't have to keep calling it digital. We just talk about communication because, of course, it's digital. But I think that at the moment, that is still, even though, we've been talking about it for more than a decade, I think it's still relatively new to a lot of the industry, this idea of a digital opinion leader. And so I think it's helpful to use that language to help them to see. We're talking about digital influence on their peers. We're talking about how digital technologies, social media, and other digital platforms are being used to share medical knowledge, to grow medical knowledge, to change medical practice, and really developing an evidence base around that. I think in the future, and it has to be, if we look forward, will it be 10 years? Will it take longer? That we'll stop calling them digital opinion leaders. We'll just call them opinion leaders, because, all the traditional metrics still matter. That, are they writing papers? Are they speaking at conferences? Are they, all those things will still happen, I'm sure, but actually they will all be involved in digital. In the early years, I remember I was asked by a client to go and train some emerging oncologists about social media and how to use social media effectively. And the chair of that meeting was a more senior in years and experience oncologist who was a traditional key opinion leader, if you like. And at the time, we were talking about various channels back in the sort of 2014, 2015 kind of years. And he said to the rest of the group that were much younger than him, he said, "You'll never find me on Facebook because I'm far too old for that." And I think there was this sense of the traditional key opinion leader who's not using social media. And actually, over the last 10 years, more of those are maybe retiring, moving out of practice, and more doctors are coming in who, digital is just completely natural to them. They used it when they were training. They use it in practice, and they are becoming, and they've become, the key opinion leaders of today, and they happen to be also digitally connected. So there's this kind of overlap, like this convergence of traditional key opinion leaders and the digital opinion leaders, and they've often been a very different crowd, and then gradually there's more and more overlap between them, and I think eventually it will converge fully. It won't be possible to be an opinion leader unless you're an opinion leader on digital channels. And of course, where are they going to change? What will social media look like in 10 years' time? I'm sure it'll be very different from what it looks like today.
Yeah. Do you think have any examples? You mentioned what type of impact these digital opinion leaders can have, but you can have one example that you think okay, yeah, this was kind of the nail on its head. This is going to be the future, and hence why creation has had such a heavy focus on it. Because you mentioned something about this is being one of the part of the platform that you're now soon to be launching as well. Have you any examples for a case? Of course, sensitive information don't need to be shared, but example of that.
It's time and time again, and that's what's been fascinating. I love learning, and I love also talking with doctors about their own use of social media and what that looks like. And again, back in the early days when we were first discovering and defining this digital opinion leader model, I was asking some doctors who were early pioneers of using social media for medical practice. And I remember speaking to an emergency medicine physician in Australia, actually, Dr. 𝗦𝘂𝗺𝗆𝗿, and he was telling me about all kinds of things they were seeing in this kind of movement that they were developing, again, more than a decade ago, where they were dealing with emergency medicine situations via social media, where we were seeing it in the data too, not only in the stories he told me, but we were seeing it in the data. We saw, for example, we saw a doctor in an emergency setting saying, I've got a 3-year-old child in with her eyes super glued closed. She thought it was makeup, but she got super glue on her eyes. What do I do? And then other doctors from around the world were chiming in and saying, oh, I had one of those 2 weeks ago. Here's what you need to do. Here's how you can solve it.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, Dr. Mike Carrigan, he was telling me how there was specifically new ways of treating patients that were discovered through doctors collaborating online in emergency settings, and knowing how to handle particular situations that then became widely accepted practice. So that for me, I was like, that was one of those moments where I was like, this absolutely is changing medicine. This changes everything. And then to see then if those doctors who have particular influence, and by influence among their peers, I don't just mean being having a lot of followers, but do other healthcare professionals trust them online? And we were seeing we built sort of an algorithm for measuring trust among peers. And if other doctors trust and other healthcare professionals trust them online, then these people can really help to shape medicine. And I've talked to doctors more recently who say like, oh, I learned about a new clinical trial that helped a patient through social media because other doctors that I trust were sharing it, and then I went and checked it out. So a patient is now on a clinical trial program who wouldn't have access to it if it wasn't for social media. I spoke to another doctor who, was lecturing at the Royal College in Scotland, the Royal College of Physicians, and he said, just literally the day before or the week before his lecture, he discovered some new medical knowledge on social media, which he then went and explored and then incorporated into his talk. Because social media is really driving that sharing of knowledge, because medical knowledge is changing so rapidly. The best way for doctors to keep on top of it is to be listening to each other. It's like they're in this big forum of conversation and they learn from each other in that kind of way. So time and time again, we were seeing a long time ago and we're still seeing now amazing stories of new things that doctors are learning and how it's changing their practice and therefore changing outcomes for patients through social media. And that's how we knew this is so important, the doctors that are shaping that. And that's also why we're getting our data into the hands of doctors. We'll talk a bit more about that. We're releasing a product that allows people to browse through and rapidly see who the digital opinion leaders are in any field, because it's such valuable insight.
Yeah, and that's a nice segue to the next question in terms of that I had regarding that app, because you mentioned that the creation and not necessarily the creation itself, but the process that started the digital opinion leaders was years back. And you also mentioned that you're in the works of creating an app for health professionals. Could you elaborate a bit more on that? Because it's a nice segue from what you just talked about in terms of these digital opinion leaders.
I dreamed for a long time. When we first launched Creation Pinpoint, which was this global database, we started building this global database of healthcare professionals on public social media so that we could isolate their voice from all the other noise and we could distill what do doctors think about anything at all. And that's helped, our advising of the World Health Organization, pharmaceutical companies, other organizations to know, right, doctors are thinking this about new treatments, about public health issues, etc. And I always thought there's so much that we're learning from these healthcare professionals as they learn from each other, as they share their collective intelligence, millions of healthcare professionals, the collective intelligence of all of those, we're able to distill that into insights. There's so much we're learning from them. And I would love to get some of that data back into their hands. I would love to be able to give, and then we're often writing articles and posting content, and we share that with doctors. But actually, what if they could explore some of that? What if they could kind of, discover also how does their own social media work impact other healthcare professionals? And it was about 10 years ago, we started scratching down some notes about what it could look like, what would it be, how would they be part of that data and actually be able to interact with the data, that they're actually a data subject themselves, and yet they're interacting with the whole data set. What could that look like? And it's been a dream to do that. But actually, last year I was at one of the world's major diabetes conferences. It's called EASD in Europe, European Association for the Study of Diabetes. And we'd taken some of our insights on the world's top, most impactful digital opinion leaders in diabetes along with us. And we were sharing those with some of the doctors that we bumped into there. And we were bumping into them as doctors who were the biggest most impactful DOLs. And we said, look, here's some of the profile that we've got from you. And they were blown away. And some of them were quite surprised at how much we were able to learn about what they thought and how that was impacted. But we also saw they started talking about it and they started sharing it with others. And they started, they were quite glad to see this is where I rank. This is, what I talk about. And they started sharing that with some of the companies that were there that they wanted to partner with and this kind of thing. So it was also in itself a kind of breakthrough moment. So all these years down the line, when we really, in a very tangible, tactile way, share this with doctors, they were blown away by, for example, we were able to visualize their network of their global network of health professional followers on social media. They may well have 30,000 followers on a particular channel, but how many of those are health professionals, and what roles are those health professionals in, and what specialties are they in? Seeing that, they loved it. And for me, I was like, okay, actually, this was September 2023, and I said, by this time next year, we need to be back here with an app where they can all get access to this. So that was probably the defining moment where I was like, we've got to do this now. And so next month in September, we will be at EASD 2024 launching the app to put it in the hands of health professionals.
That's amazing. And if you were to kind of summarize, how do you believe that app is going to change healthcare?
I think what it does at this stage, and I think, I hope it will have many iterations to come in the future as we learn and as we hear from doctors, what's useful and so on. But I think at this stage, at launch, what it allows the doctors to do is to understand the way that other healthcare professionals are interacting with their content, and it allows them to know what are they doing that's really resonating well with other healthcare professionals, compared to anything else they might be doing in terms of social media metrics, where they might be able to see, oh, so many people liked or followed this. We'll actually see this is how many healthcare professionals actually responded to it and in what kind of way. And so they'll be able to tell which kind of content is having the greatest impact on their peers. And I think that will hopefully give them the tools to continue to make a greater difference on social media. We were looking recently at somebody who, we have this big ranking of healthcare professionals in type 2 diabetes. And we were looking at someone who was ranked number, 35,000 in global impact in type 2 diabetes, which I suppose, at a worldwide level is not bad, but 35,000, there's some way to go, And we were looking at this doctor's profile and thinking, if this doctor had the app, they could actually make sure that all that time and energy they're spending on posting out social media, they could actually find what are the things, how do I make that resonate well? And who are the other doctors I should connect with who really care about this stuff? So that, the energy they put into using social media, not only for learning for themselves, but for sharing information, can benefit others more effectively. So I think that's how it'll drive, hopefully, better health outcomes.
So it's basically going to serve on a global scale as a mind-sharing platform across the health profession.
Yeah, but I think social media plays that role already. So the idea sharing happens already on, let's say, X, for example, or other channels, and we're launching on X because that's where we've seen the greatest interaction between healthcare professionals. I think that is the mind sharing platform, the social media. This tool will show them kind of the insights on what does that look like? What does that mind sharing look like? What is resonating with doctors, so I could do more of what is helpful to my peers.
Yeah, that makes sense. I truly believe that platform, if you connect the already existing mindshare that is, let's say, happens in a more organic way, but put it into a system so it becomes like a tool where all health professionals can see their ranking and see how they can improve and see how they can share better. All this, I truly believe that is going to change the healthcare professional because it's going to help it improve and make leaps in terms of development. And talking about leaps, like, since the creation of creation 26 years ago, innovation and creating new things has been kind of like a core part. Because one of the things that you mentioned was that as a agile, smaller company, you innovate quickly. You listen to the market. You see read between the lines, as you mentioned earlier in this podcast as well. And you come up with an idea and then you test it, you launch it. And you often pioneer new things. Digital Opinion Leader is the platform tracking the mindshare, to say that, and also the app that is now coming. Like, I remember I asked you the question in terms of like, how do you facilitate for that in terms of the culture, in terms of the people, and also how do you keep that innovative edge? Like, has there been any secret to it in terms of when competitors, typically the larger competitors, have just copied what you do? Like, what's been the edge and what has been the way you handle that dynamic?
I think that it's a good question. I think it can be, as you say, we talked about this as a small company. You can be very agile and you can explore new ideas quickly and you can figure out what's working and what's not. But I think the challenge actually is, as you grow, it can be harder to do that. When we were 3 or 4 people, it's very, very agile. When you go to 10, 15, and then 20 people, we're still a tiny company. but actually it can be harder to be as agile. And it's also really easy to get comfortable with what you know. And then it can start to feel risky to try new things. And the other thing is that it's really easy to be tempted to try to just mimic what the larger competitors are doing, which I think is a really futile thing because they're already established players. They're doing something. What we're finding instead is that the larger competitors, come after and start to mimic what we're doing because we have maybe seen something early, innovated, developed a solution for that, and then we've created a demand among clients who didn't know this was possible, and now they're going out asking their big providers to provide that solution. I think that some years ago, one of my colleagues was at a conference, and she heard somebody on stage, and they were presenting, and she contacted me, and she said, "They're presenting your material. They're sharing your ideas on stage. It's not fair." And I thought, you can't. No, I said, we should be flattered. We should be happy that, we've got ideas that seem to be good ideas. And we got to think of new things, and that's cool. And for me, I think that's part of my nature is to go out and create and think about what's possible. So I think that, you've got to have that driver, definitely to explore what competitors are not doing. I think when someone, it's so easy, and it happens so much in our team, oh, did you see that this competitor company is doing, whatever? We should look and do that. But actually, the question I want to know is, but what are they not doing? Let's find what they're not doing and that the clients need, and let's bring that to it, because that's how I think as a tiny company, we can compete with larger players by doing something those players are not doing, not by trying to be like them in the products and services they're offering. Let them do that, and let's go and find those little gaps where they aren't. And I think that's all part of the adventure.
Yeah. In terms of when the larger companies come to their or clients come to the larger competitors and ask, how can you do the same thing as Creation does? Like, how's the kind of the cultural aspect, even though you're a small team, like how do you handle that when employees come and say, hey, they stole this? Have you experienced that the continuance of people ripping off you guys has been it's the thing that you have to work on for the culture with the people? Because from my perspective, I believe that one way of seeing it is that the bigger boys is going to copy us either way, so why even try? Has that even been a thing that you've experienced, or has it just been the natural culture from the beginning, having this continuous innovation?
I think there is this culture of continuous innovation. I think that's something that we keep driving. So in the early days of the World Wide Web, when we first founded, and we were building custom content managed website content management systems, and there were no off-the-shelf content management systems. It seems crazy now. WordPress wasn't really around, and other easy to use content management systems were not around. So we were building custom content management systems, and they were premium solutions, and we were putting a lot of programming effort into those. And then over the years, of course, content management systems became commonplace, and they were available easily everywhere. So we absolutely had to not be trying to compete with that, because what we were doing would have been an expensive solution. So what do? Do we just try and do the same thing for less money to compete? No, actually, there are a whole lot of new things that we could be doing that weren't, and it's taking that. Where are the gaps then in provision now? What could we do now? And that's when we moved into, again, the data analytics side became much more, became much stronger, and the consulting side that came around that, and then, lots of iterations of that. I think that from a sort of cultural perspective, seeing that when we create something new that no one else is doing, then there's a demand for it, and the clients want to come back for that and want to do that. And it means that we do work. We end up working with clients, particularly that are much more open to doing new things and innovating, and are willing to invest into that. And if some of that in the future gets systemized by others, then so be it. But also, there's a lot of competitive intelligence that we have that is protected by the fact that no one knows how to do what we're doing, or no one has the data set that we've got. And so I think that, when it comes to our platforms for digital opinion leader identification, for developing insights from the online voice of healthcare professionals, the investment we've made over a long time into the platform, into the algorithm for finding health professionals on social media, it's still unmatched. And so the challenge is that an established player can come to the market and use the same language we're using, and a client thinks they're hearing the same thing. So then we have to get clever about our marketing and make sure that our clients understand that what we're doing, there's a much richer approach to the insights we're developing. And then those clients who actually do the comparison, they discover it. So yeah, I think that how we communicate and how we market that is a really important part of it too.
Yeah, totally. And looking forward, kind of what would you point out as kind of like the biggest challenges, but at the same time, the biggest opportunities for creation?
I think that, one of the things is, with so many ideas, I think that we have to continue to explore, what are the things we should try that are going to have traction in the market? What are the things that we should persevere with, even if it takes a long time to get there? I think that when we look to the future and what we've learned about serving the healthcare industry, we really see an opportunity to start to serve other sectors, particularly where there's a kind of parallel with the kind of work we're doing in healthcare. One of the things that we love about, and I love about working in the healthcare industry and the healthcare sector is that, our big picture vision is transform nations, achieve better outcomes in nations. And healthcare plays such a key part in that. As a nation starts to become more developed, healthcare plays a key role in the development of that nation, but also healthcare becomes a higher priority as that nation develops. And so healthcare is deeply connected with the development of nations. And really, I suppose, the transformation of nations. And so then I think, well, what other sectors play such a key role at the heart of nations? And I think that right now, I think it's energy, I think food supply, water supply, and those things are all deeply interconnected. And really, health sits right at the heart of that. When we think about global warming and the planetary issues that we're facing, health is right at the heart of it. Why really, ultimately, if we want to be selfish about it, why should we care for our planet? Because it affects our health. Because caring for our planet affects our health. So I think that there's a really, what for me, and again, maybe this is part of looking forward, there's a natural progression from saying, serve the healthcare industry to say, serve the energy industry, serve the food and water supply industries. And I think what's really interesting about that is those industries have got some really interesting parallels, I think, with healthcare. The healthcare sector is highly regulated. So there's a lot of compliance issues, this kind of thing. And actually, so are those. So is energy, food and water supply. They're also highly regulated industries. So they have their own sort of unique challenges. But I think collectively together, how do we bring data to help solve those is something that will be exciting to kind of explore.
Oh, yeah, totally. And as you're going navigating that, I want to go a bit more into kind of the dynamic between you and your wife, because you mentioned that briefly. Because hopefully the viewers and listeners as well have kind of picked up that it's creation. You have this innovation hub of ideas. There's continuous ideas in left and right, and some ideas take maybe a decade to come to fruition. How's that kind of balance been between looking at the financial aspect? Are we able to pay the mortgage with this?
Yeah.
To kind of like, how do we chase this new innovation, this new thing, and making it into a practical thing? Like, what's been kind of like the dynamic and balance there? You briefly mentioned it, but if you would care to kind of like just go more into it, because it sounds like it's the internal balancing act, especially with you and your wife as co-founders.
It's been an amazing journey. So we've been in business together for 26 and a half years, and we've been married for 30 years. So very early on in our marriage, we set the business up. And then we also had children in the first year of the marriage. My wife, Jo, became pregnant with our first daughter. And so now we have 3 grown-up children who've grown up, during that time we've been running the business. The business has been very much part of our lives. And they all play a role in one way or another in working in the business now too, which is kind of cool. But what I came to see was the things that made my wife and I a good couple together, good in the family and good in leading a family together, also made us good in business together. And I think that's been a great opportunity just to kind of live that out and see that those things, they come with tensions, the tension between my visionary desire to just go out and change things and do new things, and Jo's very practical, feet on the ground, making sure the systems are working. And so she's chief operating officer in the business, and she looks after finances, people, HR, all those kind of things, systems, processes, legal, and all those things have to happen. And of course, that's practical in the family too. There are ideas about things we could do, and then there's the practical side of like, what does it actually look like? If we're planning a holiday or planning something fun or whatever else it is. And I think it's the same in the business. Bringing those two things together, it's been a real gift. Of course, it's been a real source of frustration, and I personally had to learn a lot about how to handle and manage the ideas that I had and the stage at which to bring. I would sometimes say to Joe, I bring you this little seed of an idea, and it's just a little seedling and it's not ready to go out to the world yet. And I bring it to you and you just crush it and say it's never going to happen. And I think that was something we learned together, like how to both be patient with each other and to let the ideas kind of unfold and develop, and to take time and to be patient for some of those things to kind of sink in and work through. And I think that's been a real strength, that to say we make a complete whole as a couple and as business leaders together. I think it's an amazing idea. People say to me, some people have said to me, I couldn't work with my wife. But for me, I can't think of anything else. It works so well, I think. And it's a blessing to me to be able to do that. And, I should also say this, I've often said, if we were both like my wife, we would never have founded the company. We would never have taken the risk, right, to found the company. But if we were both like me, we would have been bankrupt and out of business in the first year because, without that balance to kind of make sure the cash flow is there and whatever, we would have had a real problem.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And because I've talked with people in the past that has founded companies with their spouse or with their husband, or with their partner. Like, for people listening, if you would have kind of like one recommendation or one tip or advice for someone that is in, let's say, similar shoes as you both were 26 years ago or 27, where you maybe even start to talk about or do the discussions about starting something together, like, what would be the advice to those individuals for making it work?
It's got to be that. And I don't just mean if it's a wife or husband, it could be another business partner or whatever, but you've got to put love into business. And I think that's our number one core value in creation across the team is love. Loving clients, loving suppliers, loving each other, and that covers so much. There's an ancient writing that says, I think love covers a multitude of sins. And I think that love is like that. It's like, okay, if love is there, then you can tolerate a lot, you can put up with a lot, you can be more patient. And that it doesn't always come easy, but I think recognizing that. And so I think that if you say you're thinking of going into business with your partner, your wife, your husband, or your partner, get that, the relationship has got to come first. Otherwise, the business will destroy the relationship, and that would be a shame. That would be a waste. I mean, what's the point in that? Business isn't better than a great relationship. The relationship's always the more important thing. So yeah, I think putting love in the heart of it is key.
Yeah, I love that. And the final question I have, Daniel, is we talked about this because it was a bit of a philosophical question, maybe, for you to ask. And I asked, there are two ways of asking this. But I'm going to go with one of them, and that is, if there is one question that, looking at what you've been doing for the past 26 years and what you're doing currently and what you're going to do in the future, given the nature of the business and what you do, if there's one question that you would love an answer to, either from a future guest, from someone listening, someone viewing this video and the podcast, what would that question be? And please share some context around it so that the people listening or viewing this can maybe get the context, understand it better, and then be able to maybe reach out.
Great. No, I like that. Okay, so here's the thing. Sometimes we face delay, and I've seen this so many times when we talked about the HCP app, and we first dreamed of it back in 2014, and now here we are 10 years later. Sometimes we do face delay. Sometimes that delay is outside of our own control and can be really frustrating. Sometimes it's our own choice that we choose to delay something. Sometimes we feel that we're not ready, whatever. But often delay can be a real frustration. But the question is, what is the benefit of delay?
That's a good one. So you're listening, you're watching this video. If you have a answer to that, or if that's maybe a question that you thought about yourself, then Daniel, where can people find you if they might have an answer to that?
Great, fantastic.
Or if they want to learn more.
Find me best place to find me is probably on LinkedIn, Daniel Ghinn, Ghinn. I think there are only 3 Daniel Ghinns in the world, actually. So, look me up there and I'm at creation.co. You can also find me on X, Creation Daniel. They're probably the best two channels to reach out to me.
Perfect. Daniel, it was a pleasure. Thank you for taking part of the podcast.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Harold.